On February 22nd, 2023, Elon Musk stood next to California Governor Gavin Newsom and announced that Tesla's global engineering headquarters was moving to Palo Alto. That would be an unremarkable piece of corporate news anywhere else. But 2 years earlier, Musk had made Tesla the single most cited proof point in the story that Silicon Valley was dying, and Austin, Texas was its replacement. He had moved Tesla's corporate headquarters there in 2021, built a $1.1 billion factory outside the city, and told anyone who would listen that California had gotten complacent. Now, the same company was quietly moving its engineering brain back to the state it had just left less than 3 years later. That single reversal wouldn't mean much on its own, but it lines up with a pattern that shows up across almost every metric that made Austin the poster child of the next Silicon Valley story in the first place. Citywide office vacancy climbed to roughly 25 to 27% by 2025 and 2026, the highest on record, with downtown vacancy running even worse at nearly 32%. LinkedIn's own migration data shows the flow of tech workers from San Francisco to Austin dropped 23% between the year ending April 2024 and the year ending April 2025, with New York to Austin moves down 11% over the same stretch. So how does a city that was supposed to be the permanent escape hatch from the coasts end up with record high empty office space and a shrinking inbound tech migration less than 5 years later? The easy explanation is return to office. Big companies called workers back to their coastal headquarters starting in 2022 and 2023. And some of the people who'd relocated to Austin during the pandemic went with them. That's real, and it's part of the story. But it doesn't explain why the office space itself, built specifically to house the wave of companies and workers the hype cycle promised, sat empty at record rates even as Austin kept posting genuinely strong numbers elsewhere, like record venture funding in 2025. The deeper issue isn't that people went home, it's that the 2021 pitch oversold something Austin's actual infrastructure and cost structure couldn't sustain once the migration itself changed the conditions that made the pitch attractive in the first place. In the year following the initial pandemic exodus from May 2020 to April 2021, Austin had the highest net inflow of tech workers of any major U.S. city in the country, gaining roughly 217 tech workers for every 10,000 LinkedIn users, while the Bay Area lost about 80 per 10,000 over the same period. Tesla and Oracle both relocated their headquarters there in 2020. Venture capital followed. Austin startups raised $5.5 billion across 412 deals in 2021, more than double what they had raised the year before, with multiple companies crossing billion-dollar valuations that same year. The pitch that pulled all of this in was simple and, at the time, largely true. Austin offered the same tech ecosystem access as the coasts at a fraction of the cost, with no state income tax and a much lower cost of living. That comparison worked in 2020 and 2021. It stopped being true as fast as the migration itself made it true. A surge of demand from well-paid tech workers and companies drove Austin's housing and the commercial real estate market up sharply during exactly the years the hype was peaking, eroding the specific advantage that had made the pitch work in the first place. Here's the part that actually explains the empty offices. Developers and companies didn't just respond to real demand, they built and leased space on the assumption that the migration wave was permanent and would keep accelerating based on a narrative that was reinforcing itself in real time. Every high-profile relocation generated more press, which generated more relocations, which generated more press. That's a normal pattern in any hype cycle, but it has a specific cost in commercial real estate. Office space gets built for a projected future headcount, not the headcount that actually shows up. When the return to office wave hit in 2022 and 2023, and when Tesla itself, the company most responsible for legitimizing the whole narrative, quietly pulled its engineering function back to California, the office space built for the boom case scenario didn't have the tenants to fill it. Vacancy climbed for 8 straight years before showing its first year-over-year decline in 2025, and even that modest improvement came alongside Austin losing roughly 9,000 office-using jobs the same year. Here's where it gets more interesting than a simple boom-bust story, and where you have to be careful not to oversell the collapse the way the original hype oversold the boom. Austin's 2025 venture funding numbers were genuinely record-breaking. $7.19 billion invested, up 64.8% from the year before, according to Crunchbase data. Taken alone, that looks like proof the overhyped narrative is wrong and Austin's ecosystem is thriving. But look at how that money was actually distributed. Roughly 38% of all capital deployed in Austin in 2025 went to just the top 5 financings, deals like the roughly $935 million total raised by robotics company Apptronik across an initial round and its extension. That's a headline number built on a handful of enormous capital-intensive deals, not a broad base of new companies getting funded across the ecosystem. A record top-line number and a genuinely broad, healthy startup base are two different things, and Austin's 2025 numbers look a lot more like the first than the second. None of this is one clean cause. 3 things are compounding. First, the office market is still working through years of speculative overbuilding done during the hype peak, against a workforce that partially reverted to hybrid or coastal-based work once headquarters companies called people back. Second, the specific value proposition that pulled the migration wave in, dramatically lower cost of living than the coasts, eroded during exactly the years the wave was happening, as housing demand from incoming tech workers pushed prices up. The city that got the affordability pitch is measurably less affordable now than when the pitch was first made. Third, the funding narrative that's often cited as proof the hype was justified is itself concentrated in a small number of outsized, capital-intensive deals, meaning the headline figure can look like validation of the boom, while the underlying breadth of the startup ecosystem tells a narrower story. None of this means Austin is a bad place to start a company or that it is collapsing. It's not. Business formation rates are still elevated. The metro still attracted the highest tech talent growth of any market in North America by some measures, and companies like Samsung are still making multi-billion-dollar, decade-scale bets on the region. What did not hold up is the specific 2021 claim that Austin had become a permanent, one-way substitute for Silicon Valley, immune to the cost dynamics and cyclicality that hit every other market. What Austin actually became is a real, durable, second-tier tech hub, which is a genuine achievement, just a much less dramatic one than the next Silicon Valley implied. The city's own office and migration numbers are the clearest evidence that the promise and the outcome were never quite the same thing. Whether the current wave of AI and robotics funding gets priced with that lesson in mind, or inflates the exact same story a second time, is still an open question.